Hey friends, David Lightbringer coming to you with a quick video recorded late at night. Birds are in bed and quiet, and earlier today, George R.R. Martin released an update on his Not-a-Blog to talk about both House of the Dragon and A Song of Ice and Fire, namely the Winds of Winter, and which characters he's been writing about. Anyway, it went a little something like this. House of the Dragon, glad you asked. I've now watched rough cuts of 9 of the 10 episodes, and I continue to be impressed. I cannot speak to the special effects, many of which are not in yet, but the look of it is great, and the acting, the directing, and the writing are first-rate. And yes, for all you book fans, it is my story. Sure, there are some changes from Fire and Blood. We could not present 3 alternate versions of every major event, and keep our sanity, but I think Ryan Concel and his writers made good choices. So I'll just pop in here real quick to highlight, or to point out that George is highlighting this very fun aspect of the story writing in Fire and Blood, and how that will create a sort of choose-your-own adventure for Ryan Concel and Miguel Sapochnik, as I've been saying in my videos lately. And of course, I'm just referring to the fun house of inaccurate history that is Fire and Blood. It's, got it right here. Fire and Blood. And of course, it's the fake history account written by a maester who's writing years after the fact and compiling from 3 different sources, one of which is Mushroom, the other 2 a maester and a septon. None of it is 100%, and very little of it is first person. So that's what George is talking about when he said, well, we couldn't do 3 different versions of everything. So they got to pick. I got to pick what actually happened, and this is the choose your own adventure thing. And the very exciting part about this is it means that even if you know Fire and Blood word for word, we still don't know what really happened with all these events. And so the show will still hold surprises. We don't know actually what happened with anything. So lots of surprises coming our way. It'll be very fun to see. And as I've also been saying lately, a lot of the characters in Fire and Blood come across as pretty bad people making very selfish decisions which plunge the realm into chaos. This is a story about a civil war, so it's fundamentally a failure of governance. But since this is all biased history, the showrunners have an opportunity to make these characters, especially earlier on in their stories, a little more sympathetic, not so bad and selfish, and they, we just don't know. We just don't know what's going to be in store. We don't know how sympathetic Alicent, Rhaenyra, Viserys, we know Otto's kind of but, apart from that, we'll just have to see. So, and real quickly, I want to mention possibly this Sunday or maybe next Sunday, I'll be doing a very cool live stream with Tony Teflon, the Don Tony Teflon. Check out his YouTube channel, Teflon TV. And we'll be playing the blame game, where we'll assign blame to all the different people and even the sort of meta factors like feudal monarchy and patriarchy and all that stuff. So don't miss that. Starry Wisdom Sundays, every Sunday at 3 p.m. Pacific. All you have to do is make sure you're subscribed to the channel with the notifications set to all, and your phone will give you a little beepy beep when we go live. So getting back to the update, George is talking about the changes made while adapting Fire and Blood for House of the Dragon, and he's saying, even some improvements. Heresy, I know, but being the author, I'm allowed to say so. For years, as some of you may recall, I've been saying that the TV version of Shae, as portrayed by Sibel Kekili, was a deeper, richer, and more nuanced character than the Shae in my novels. In a similar vein, I'm vastly impressed by the show's version of King Viserys, played by Paddy Considine, who gives the character a tragic majesty that my book Viserys never quite achieved. Kudos to Paddy, Ryan and his writers, and Miguel and the other directors. There are a lot of great performances in House of the Dragon, or HotD, as I hear some are calling it. You may have never heard of some of our actors, but I think you will learn to love them, just as you did with the cast of Game of Thrones. So what George is talking about is the process of fleshing out the characters that we've been saying has to happen for all these people, because all we really have is a snapshot of their actions, an outside view of the choices they made, but we don't know what their motivations of the heart were. We don't have that rich context. We don't have the dialogue. Ryan Concel and Miguel Sapochnik, they will be having to flesh out and bring these characters to life. So to hear George being pleasantly surprised by the way that Viserys is coming to life on the screen, this is very cool. And again, this is a reason why we can look forward to being surprised a little bit on the show, even if we essentially know what Fire and Blood says happened. So definitely another reason to look forward to House of the Dragon. And by the way, some of you guys might not know, George recently did an interview alongside Ryan Concel, and they were talking about the working relationship they have. And a couple of things jumped out to me. Ryan was saying that when he was writing the scripts for the first couple episodes, he actually sent them to George and had him look them over and send them back to him. So this is what George means, apparently, when he said he's working very closely with the showrunners. He's having feedback on the drafts of the script, and I think it shows that, well, you can just really tell that Ryan is a huge fan of the work. George speaks highly of his knowledge of the work, and Ryan seems to be doing just what you'd think a fan of the work would be doing, which is trying to adapt the story and just make it bigger, better, bring it to life, and do so in a way that makes the author proud. So in this case, we've literally got the author giving his stamp of approval during the process, so pretty good. It just means that House of the Dragon isn't going to suck, at the very least. It's probably going to be pretty good. It's definitely not going to be some sort of train wreck. It's going to be a pretty good show. It's going to be worth watching. All right, so now the exciting part, the Winds of Winter update. Here it goes. Winds, you say? Yes, still working. Finally finished a clutch of Cersei chapters that were giving me fits. Now I'm wrestling with Jaime and Brienne. The work proceeds, though not as fast as many of you would like. So this is cool. This is the first we've heard about what characters he's writing for in quite a while. And most exciting of all, it sounds like Jaime and Brienne are essentially still traveling together. You know, he's working on Cersei's chapters on the one hand, now he's working on Jaime and Brienne's chapter, wrestling with Jaime and Brienne's chapters. I don't know if that's a Jaime and Brienne are wrestling in the dark reference. Yeah. So, of course, we know that Jaime and Brienne were last seen in Stoneheart's Cave. We're on the way back to Stoneheart's Cave. If you remember, Jaime was out scouting and doing Lannister deeds in the Riverlands, and Brienne sort of just shows up one night near the town of Pennytree, where Sir Arlen Dunk's, the knight that trained Dunk, is from. But in any case, Brienne showed up that one night. Jaime followed her into the woods. Jaime hasn't been seen in a couple weeks, and we know that he's been led back to Stoneheart's lair. Stoneheart is compelling Brienne and now Jaime to do her bidding. And as I discussed with Quinn from Quinn's Ideas in our world famous Winds of Winter predictions video, Lady Stoneheart. You can check it out on the Winds of Winter predictions playlist. The big thing here is that Stoneheart probably wants to retake Riverrun. It's not a matter of just killing Jaime or even just humiliating Jaime, but family, duty, honor. Those are the Tully words. Riverrun and Winterfell are both in the hands of the enemies of the Starks and Tullys. And in the case of Riverrun, it's in the hands of a Lannister-Frey alliance. So it seems like Lady Stoneheart can compel Jaime to act as a sort of Trojan horse to perhaps open up the gates from the inside and aid House Tully in taking back Riverrun. The big question is, what happens from there? We know Jaime had that dream where he and Brienne are wielding flaming swords down in a dream version of the under caverns of Casterly Rock. And from the words of Cersei, talking about when the light of Brienne's sword goes out, so will Jaime's. We know that Jaime and Brienne's fates are intertwined, and that Jaime's life may depend on Brienne staying alive or fulfilling her destiny. And the giant flaming swords that they're wielding in that vision is probably a clue about their destiny. Probably something to do with making it up north to Winterfell or the Wall to fight the others. Of course, they've already got one Valyrian steel sword between them. Maybe they'll get Widow's Wail, I don't know. But the big question is, does Jaime have another interaction with Cersei before he ends up going north for, the long night in the last battle? I tend to think not. I tend to think he's going to go on a whole journey before he sees Cersei again, and that's probably not going to happen until the end of the story. But who knows? I could be wrong. Maybe he'll go back to King's Landing after the whole Riverrun affair. So leave a comment. Let me know what you think. And as for Brienne, she's true blue. She's valiant to the end. She's definitely headed towards the north and playing an important role in, the battle for the Long Night. So, of course, he also said that he finished a clutch of Cersei chapters, and also that they were giving him fits. So we have to wonder about which chapters he was working on and why they were difficult, right? So what's coming up next for Cersei? Obviously, the trial by combat with Ungregor and some sort of champion of the faith, quite possibly the Hound, who is almost certainly the gravedigger on the Quiet Isle and thus connected to the faith already. And then Cersei is either going to come out victorious in the trial by combat or maybe a mass murderer. Maybe we'll get a Septive Baelor type incident that will leave Cersei in charge in King's Landing, regardless of what the gods had to say about the trial by combat and Cersei's virtue. But the point is, it does seem like Cersei will come away from that in charge in King's Landing, so there's going to be some consolidation of power. Kevin Lannister is dead, possibly all the Tyrells now, we don't know. And then the next thing, of course, is that Fagon is going to show up. He seems to be victorious at Storm's End. He's sweeping through the Stormlands on his way to King's Landing. Of course, Dany sees Fagon as the Mummer's dragon cheered by a crowd. Most of us have always taken that to mean that Fagon's probably going to take King's Landing. He'll be a popular king. He'll be replacing Cersei, so he's going to be popular. He's probably bringing some food and resources and whatnot. Maybe an elephant, he's got those elephants. So of course, Cersei's going to have to navigate that whole situation. We might get a burning of the Sept of Baelor now instead of at the trial. Perhaps a Jon Con-involved wildfire incident. But most people think that Cersei is going to flee King's Landing somewhere in the process of Fagon taking King's Landing. And of course, she'd be fleeing to Casterly Rock, which I believe that George has said we're going to see. And this would be the logical way, through Cersei's eyes, fleeing to Casterly Rock, and then probably slinking back to King's Landing, Saruman-like, to do the scouring of the Shire move. And essentially the parallel there is that Saruman, of course, after being defeated at Orthanc, eventually slinks back to the Shire, and the Hobbit heroes have to deal with him after returning from the big battle in Mordor. So here we'd have Cersei slinking off to Casterly Rock after being defeated, but then coming back to King's Landing while everyone's up north fighting the others. And then this is where the Starks come back down to King's Landing, sort of close the loop on the Stark-Lannister conflict that began the story. And this is also going to parallel Cregan Stark in the Hour of the Wolf from the House of the Dragon story, where Cregan Stark comes to King's Landing and passes harsh judgment on all the various traitors and evildoers. And then most importantly, George has to write about the ongoing disintegration of the relationship between Jaime and Cersei. So whether or not they come into contact, Cersei will still be hearing updates, maybe about the fall of Riverrun or Jaime appearing. And so she will continue to have to deal with like I said, the disintegration of her relationship with her brother and her lover, Jaime Lannister. And then one final note on Alicent, a great catch by Ezra Berman on YouTube. He noticed a passage a little further on in Fire and Blood, which adds a little more context to Alicent. So check this out. At the end of her life, she essentially is just grieving for her children because she outlives her children, which is very sad. And it actually says that she develops a deep aversion to the color green. So clearly there's a lot of regret going on. This is a woman who's lost her children. She hates green now, so she's probably chewing on all the mistakes she made and the part that she had to play in the dance. And then even more interesting is this passage. In her last days, the Queen Dowager seemed to become more lucid. She had been talking to herself a little bit, lost in her grief, if you will. I want to see my sons again, she told her septa, and Helena, my sweet girl, oh, and King Jaehaerys. I will read to him as I did when I was little. He used to say I had a lovely voice. Strangely, in her final hours, Queen Alicent spoke often of the old king, but never of her husband, King Viserys. So essentially, Alicent is facing her death here. That's what she means when she's talking about seeing all her dead children and King Jaehaerys. And obviously the notable part is that she speaks often of Jaehaerys in fond terms, but never mentions Viserys. So this could be taken as a clue that there was hanky-panky going on between Alicent and Jaehaerys, but I don't really think so. I think what we're supposed to take from this is just the disrespect and disregard and probably contempt that Alicent must have developed for Viserys and his weakness. And this is meant to be contrasted to the regard and respect that she has for Jaehaerys. It's also just kind of sweet and innocent. It makes the reading sound sweet and innocent. Oh, I'll read to him again. He always liked that. So it seems like Jaehaerys probably was more of a father, or I guess you'd say a grandfather figure to Alicent, and Mushroom was just spreading vile calumnies. But again, I think the biggest point is she didn't ever mention Viserys' part, so probably, like I said, I think there's a lot of contempt that develops over time. But we'll have to see on House of the Dragon as they flesh out these characters and decide how they want to portray them. So thanks a lot for watching, everyone, and thanks to everyone watching the Alicent video. And if you don't know, I've got a whole House of the Dragon playlist. I've got videos on House Targaryen, House Velaryon, the Byzantine influences on House Targaryen, videos about the dragons, Vhagar in particular, and of course, the Anti-Dragon Maester Conspiracy Part 1 and 2. So check out the House of the Dragon playlist. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you every Sunday, 3 p.m. Pacific, for Starry Wisdom Sunday. See you later, guys.